At 2:47 p.m., a Ukrainian Mi-24 Hin gunship committed what appeared to be tactical suicide. Flying straight into known Russian air defense coverage, the helicopter violated every principle of combat aviation survival. Low, slow, and completely exposed over the Oleski sector, it was practically gift-wrapped for enemy missile teams. Russian operators watched in disbelief as this prime target presented itself in broad daylight. A fully armed attack helicopter, bristling with weapons, deliberately entering their kill zone made absolutely no sense. The Mi-24's flight path defied all logic. This sector had remained relatively quiet for months, seeing only occasional drone activity and scattered artillery duels. Yet here was a valuable gunship, loaded with 4 B-8V rocket pods containing 80 S-8 unguided rockets, exposing itself at dangerously low altitude over contested airspace. Each 80mm rocket weighs 11.7 kilograms and carries a 1.1 kilogram high-explosive warhead capable of penetrating 400 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor. This level of firepower in such a quiet sector was like bringing a battleship to a fishing tournament, completely disproportionate and strategically baffling. But the Russians didn't question their good fortune. That oversight would prove catastrophic. Hidden in a damaged building 3.2 kilometers away, a two-man Russian manpads team had been observing the Ukrainian helicopter through military-grade binoculars for nearly 4 minutes. Their weapon of choice was the 9K-38 Igla surface-to-air missile system, one of Moscow's most sophisticated man-portable air defense platforms. The complete system weighed 17.9 kilograms when combat-ready, featuring a 1.5-meter missile packed with a 1.17-kilogram warhead containing 390 grams of high explosives. Enough destructive power to reduce any helicopter to burning wreckage. However, the explosive charge wasn't the helicopter crew's primary concern. The real threat resided in the missile's nose cone. The 9M39 missile's advanced cooled infrared seeker represented a quantum leap over previous generations. Utilizing nitrogen cooling technology to minimize sensor noise while maximizing detection capabilities, this sophisticated guidance system could theoretically distinguish between genuine aircraft exhaust signatures and standard countermeasure flares. The cooling mechanism provided the seeker with enhanced discrimination capabilities that made it exceptionally lethal against low-flying aircraft. This technological advantage would soon be tested. The Ukrainian pilot initiated his attack sequence, rolling into a steep dive before unleashing all 80 rockets in a spectacular ripple-fire pattern. The S-8 rockets screamed earthward at 610 meters per second, spreading across a massive 500-meter impact zone. But something appeared fundamentally wrong with this assault. Numerous rockets splashed uselessly into the Dnieper River below. Others detonated harmlessly in empty agricultural fields, creating towering columns of mud and scattered debris. Only a handful actually struck meaningful targets or structures. This seemed like area suppression rather than precise tactical strikes, an apparent waste of valuable munitions in what had been a relatively inactive sector. However, this seemingly random 500-meter spread pattern served dual purposes that Russian observers completely failed to recognize. Beyond suppressing a wide geographical area, it created optimal conditions to provoke an immediate air defense response. Any competent manpads team witnessing such an apparently sloppy attack would feel professionally obligated to engage what looked like an easy, vulnerable target. The Russian team responded exactly according to their training protocols. Soviet-era military doctrine demanded immediate engagement of any aircraft operating within the Igla's 5.2-kilometer operational envelope. The gunner conducted final weapon system checks. Technical specifications confirmed the Igla could successfully engage targets traveling up to 800 meters per second at maximum altitudes of 3.5 kilometers. The Ukrainian helicopter, flying low and maintaining relatively slow speeds during its attack run, presented an ideal target well within engagement parameters. As the gunner aligned his weapon northeast, a crucial tactical detail became apparent. The helicopter had deliberately penetrated occupied territory. From the Russian firing position, the Igla's 5.2-kilometer maximum range couldn't even span the Dnieper River. This meant Ukrainian forces were accepting extraordinary operational risks specifically to ensure Russian forces would take the bait. What the Russian team catastrophically failed to consider was why any Ukrainian helicopter would expose itself so brazenly in broad daylight over a sector with confirmed air defense coverage. The Oleski area offered minimal strategic value, contained negligible troop concentrations, and lacked critical infrastructure requiring immediate suppression. The helicopter's flight path strongly suggested it had crossed the Dnieper River into occupied airspace, since the Igla's range limitations prevented engagement from across the water. These tactical inconsistencies should have triggered immediate alarm bells, but the tempting target completely overrode their tactical judgment. This oversight would prove absolutely fatal. The trap had been perfectly set, and at exactly 2:48 p.m., as the final S-8 rockets impacted below, the Russian operator squeezed his trigger. The Igla's infrared seeker achieved solid lock on the Mi-24's engine exhaust signature, and the missile's solid-fuel rocket motor ignited with a brilliant white flash visible for kilometers. The missile accelerated rapidly to approximately Mach 1.9, streaking toward its target while the cooled infrared seeker maintained perfect lock despite challenging afternoon sun conditions. Everything was proceeding exactly as the Russian team expected, and exactly as the Ukrainians had planned. The Ukrainian pilot's SPO-15 Berioza radar warning receiver immediately detected the missile launch, though his calm reaction clearly indicated he had been anticipating this exact moment. The SPO-15 operates across multiple frequency bands from 0.66 to 17 GHz, continuously monitoring electromagnetic emissions from hostile radar systems and missile seekers. The sophisticated system employs 4 strategically positioned antennas around the aircraft fuselage to provide complete 360-degree coverage, calculating threat bearing with impressive 15-degree accuracy. The threat library contained within the SPO-15 recognizes over 600 different emission signatures, instantly categorizing them by specific weapon system type and threat level. But this advanced system does far more than simple detection. It prioritizes multiple threats simultaneously on a 16 LED display, showing precise bearing and threat intensity while generating distinct audio tones for each threat category. A continuous 800 Hz tone indicates enemy radar lock. A pulsing 1600 Hz warning signals missile launch, while rapid chirping sounds indicate active terminal guidance phases. In this engagement, the distinctive high-pitched pulsing tone at 1600 Hz confirmed an infrared-guided missile launch. This was precisely what the pilot had been waiting for. Banking aggressively to the left while simultaneously deploying countermeasures, the Mi-24 released a carefully calculated pattern of 12 infrared flares in rapid succession. The helicopter's UV-26 countermeasures dispensing system, mounted prominently on the aircraft's fuselage, contained 192 PPI-26 infrared flares total. These specialized flares burn at temperatures exceeding 2000 degrees Celsius, creating powerful infrared signatures specifically designed to seduce incoming missiles away from the helicopter's genuine engine exhaust. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. In this critical instant, the entire battlefield transformed into a thermal nightmare scenario. 80 exploding rockets below created an extensive wall of heat signatures, while 12 fresh flares bloomed like artificial suns above. The missile seeker, originally designed to track a single target, suddenly faced dozens of competing thermal sources. It resembled trying to identify one specific light bulb in Times Square at midnight. Completely impossible. Each S-8 rocket impact generated secondary heat blooms, persisting for several crucial seconds. The explosive warheads ignited vegetation, fuel, and combustible materials, generating dozens of additional infrared sources across the 500-meter impact zone. These ground-level heat signatures, combined with the helicopter's flares at altitude, created a three-dimensional maze of thermal confusion that no 1980s-era seeker could successfully navigate. The seeker logic lacked sufficient sophistication to discriminate between these multiple signatures. It lost lock on the helicopter and selected the brightest available heat source, a cluster of burning rocket impacts 150 meters from the actual aircraft. The missile streaked harmlessly past the Ukrainian helicopter, close enough for the crew to observe its passage, but sufficiently distant to avoid any damage from the proximity fuse activation. This miss had always been the expected outcome from the beginning. The real victory was about to unfold next. By firing their missile, The Russian man-pads team had just sealed their own fate. The launch signature, a brilliant infrared plume visible to multiple sensor systems, pinpointed their exact position within the building. Ukrainian signals intelligence systems immediately triangulated the launch location using the missile's distinctive heat signature combined with electromagnetic emissions from the team's communications equipment. The critical 90-second window for signals intelligence processing represented a genuine revolution in modern battlefield awareness. In previous conflicts, identifying and accurately transmitting a firing position might require 15 to 30 minutes of processing time. However, Ukrainian forces had compressed this timeline dramatically through integrated sensor networks and streamlined communication protocols. By the time those crucial 90 seconds expired, targeting data had already reached the appropriate strike asset. In this specific case, the targeting information transmitted directly to a waiting FPV drone operator positioned 8 kilometers away. This represented a fundamental evolution in modern helicopter tactics. Rather than avoiding air defense systems entirely, Ukrainian pilots now deliberately expose themselves to draw enemy fire. This acceptance of calculated risk doctrine represented a complete reversal of traditional helicopter employment philosophy. Instead of utilizing terrain masking and standoff weapons to avoid air defenses, Ukrainian pilots now use their aircraft as bait, trusting in advanced countermeasures while accepting potential losses to achieve the greater strategic goal of systematically eliminating enemy air defense networks. This calculated gamble contradicted everything traditional military academies taught, but it was proving devastatingly effective in actual combat conditions. The acceptance of calculated risk transformed the Mi-24 from potential victim into an active hunter that consumed igloos for breakfast. Meanwhile, the Russian team began their standard post-engagement procedures, completely unaware that an 8-minute countdown to their elimination had already started. Soviet doctrine mandated immediate relocation after firing to avoid counter-battery response. During the Cold War era, this shoot-and-scoot tactic provided reasonable safety margins, as enemy response times typically measured in tens of minutes or even hours. However, modern surveillance technology and networked operations had compressed this timeline to single digits. The real genius behind this operation was about to begin. At 2:49 p.m., the FPV drone operator received final confirmation of target coordinates. The operator powered up a modified commercial quadcopter, its civilian origins concealing deadly military purpose. The 1.5-kilogram warhead attached where a camera gimbal would normally sit represented perfect fusion of consumer technology and military innovation. The drone lifted off and set course for the Russian position, flying at just 50 meters altitude to avoid radar detection and visual observation. The Russian man-pads team continued their equipment pack-up procedure, focused entirely on their complex weapon system rather than security considerations. The 9K-38 Igla system, while technically man-portable, required several critical steps to properly stow after firing. The missile's launch tube had to be disconnected from the gripstock assembly. The battery coolant unit, now completely expended, required safe disposal to prevent dangerous chemical exposure. The thermal battery that powered the seeker needed careful removal. Each component had to be secured properly in its designated carrying case for transport. This pack-up process required between 4 and 6 minutes under ideal conditions, an eternity in modern warfare. However, the muddy terrain of the Dnieper River Delta transformed this routine procedure into an absolute nightmare. Summer rains had turned the ground into thick mud that clung tenaciously to boots and equipment. The building that had provided excellent concealment and a stable firing platform now became a deadly trap as the team struggled to navigate debris and damaged stairs while carrying nearly 18 kilograms of complex equipment. The vulnerability window inherent in man-pads employment represented a critical weakness that Ukrainian forces had identified early in the conflict. During pack-up operations, crews cannot simultaneously disassemble complex weapon systems and maintain proper situational awareness. This 4 to 6 minute period of task fixation created a precise opportunity that drone operators trained specifically to exploit. The distributed nature of Ukrainian operations enabled this rapid response capability. Rather than following traditional military hierarchies where targeting data must flow upward through battalion, brigade, and division headquarters for approval, Ukrainian forces operated with remarkable autonomy. The drone operator received coordinates directly from signals intelligence and could immediately engage without waiting for lengthy approval chains. This flat command structure, resembling Silicon Valley more than Soviet Army doctrine, compressed decision cycles from 30 minutes to under 2 minutes. At 2:54 p.m., 6 minutes after the failed missile engagement, the Ukrainian drone approached the target area. Through the first-person view feed, the operator observed 2 Russian soldiers still at their firing position, struggling desperately with their equipment. The 17.9-kilogram Igla system, awkward to carry even under ideal conditions, became nearly impossible to manage quickly in muddy terrain. The drone's approach profile maximized success probability while minimizing detection risk. Flying at 50 meters altitude placed it below most radar systems' minimum detection threshold. The quadcopter's small size and plastic construction provided minimal radar cross-section. Electric motors produced virtually no thermal signature, unlike fuel-powered aircraft. Most importantly, electric motors generated a unique acoustic signature, a high-pitched whine only audible within 100 to 200 meters. By the time you heard an electric drone, escape was already impossible. At 2:55 p.m., 7 minutes after firing their missile, the Russians finally noticed the incoming threat. The distinctive sound of drone rotors, burned into every soldier's memory after months of combat, triggered immediate recognition. However, confined near the building while carrying heavy equipment through mud, no escape route existed. At precisely 2:56 p.m., exactly 8 minutes after the Igla launch, the drone struck. The 1.5-kilogram warhead detonated on impact, ensuring one less Igla could threaten Ukrainian aircraft. Within hours, intercepted Russian military communications revealed panic spreading throughout air defense networks. Manpads crews across multiple sectors received urgent new operational directives. Hold fire unless given explicit engagement orders. This psychological warfare triumph created widespread hesitation among Russian operators, who now understood that pulling the trigger meant signing their own death warrant. The fear of immediate drone retaliation fundamentally degraded the entire air defense system's combat effectiveness. Ukrainian aircraft now enjoyed unprecedented operational freedom, knowing Russian crews faced an impossible choice between duty and survival.